Hi everyone, I'd like to start with a question for you, if this works. Why never in history had we had modern art, and then all of a sudden, 200, 100 years ago, this popped up, and then we had Picasso and so on? Any thoughts on this? Something happened, there was photography. So before artists, their job was to depict what they saw, and then all of a sudden, there was photography, and they had to find a new idea. And I think what we're going to see today with generative AIs will have the same magnitude of an impact across the board of many, many things in our lives. And first of all, I'd like to start with a simple question and zoom out a little bit on what is AI and how we got there. So what is AI? AI means artificial intelligence, which can be defined as the contrary of human stupidity, right? So what is exactly intelligence? Intelligence, in my opinion, is the ability to achieve your goals with limited resources. Because if you have a lot of resources, then there's no surprise you can achieve your goals, but with limited resources, you do need intelligence. And a big part of intelligence is learning, and machine learning is what machines do to replicate, to some extent, what we're doing in our minds. And the way that you can define it is that the more data you give it, the better it gets. So you just show examples to the machine, and then it learns from there. Now you remember the first definition about intelligence, it's that you can use limited resources. So when you want to do a machine learning algorithm or design, it's a good feature that it doesn't need a lot of data, or that it does not need so much human input, because if it needs a lot of work, it's not so smart, but if you can make it work with very little work from the human side, it means that it's quite smart. So the goal of AI researchers over the last decades have been to, how can we achieve something that's useful, but with using little human inputs, okay? So now, just a word on generative AIs. What are they? Of course, you all heard of ChatGPT here and there. It's doing the headlines every day. Here are some free ideas for startups for you guys, if you're ever looking for an idea of a startup that no one ever thought about. Or, well, it doesn't know what no one ever thought about, but it can tell you about things that it thinks are relevant still. Okay, more ideas. And it's not limited to this. Probably you heard also of generative AIs for images. This is DALL-E 2 with a little prompt of mine. But I think this goes way beyond that. So you have generative AIs for coding as well, but not only this, also for music, generating books for children. This will be very relevant for science as well. Also, you can imagine doing whole designs for clothing, for phones, for shoes, for furniture, for architecture. Everyday object that we use, you could think of generating their design with a generative AI, and that changes a lot of things. So we're going to have a look at this towards the end. So how did we get there? As I mentioned before, data is a key component of researchers in AI. And in the beginning, let's do a bit of AI archaeology. In the beginning, people thought, okay, how about we ask some expert, and then they sit down and they write all the rules about something. And this works, but to a certain extent. This is an example of what you can do if you want to do medical diagnostics. You ask a doctor how they think about it, you write down the rules, and then when you give an example to the machine, you work out a little tree, and you see where you end up, okay? So next level is maybe you could have some data points and then learn that tree automatically, but it's still kind of limited, and certainly this doesn't work really well with an image which is a lot more complex than a few questions. So for images, for example, what works pretty well are neural networks. And in a neural network, the idea is that you have different layers that will process the data, a bit like what happens in your eyes. So the first layers, they will process very local data like corners and edges and so on. And then if you detect a certain configuration of edges and corners, it moves up to the next level, which will look at textures. And then it goes to the next level, parts of objects, and then a whole object, okay? So what this means is that you can use less data if you learn on a more general topic and then you specialize. For example, let's say that you want to teach the AI how to recognize zebras. If you already know of horses, it's a lot easier because all the layers in the beginning, so the edges, the textures, and even parts of the zebra, they look quite similar to a horse. So that's why you can use less data. But then let's push this a little further. How about you want to use almost no data? Because the problem with the horses is someone still has to sit down and say there is a horse here or there is no horse there. And that's still a lot of work. And my math teacher, when I was at school, told me mathematicians are lazy. And so are AI researchers to some extent. So an idea is, why don't we create this exercise automatically? We'll take a picture, and then we'll degrade it so much. We'll just add some noise, as you can see here, and then we'll create the exercise to go the other way around. So try to denoise the image based on that. And that way, to denoise the image, to see like what the cat would look like, you need to have implicit knowledge of what a cat looks like. So this creates a sort of artificial exercise. And you can use the same concept for text as well. This is the article from Wikipedia about an apple. And imagine you just cut it somewhere, and then you create a new exercise about guessing the next word. So the sentence ends, the tree originated in Central Asia, where its wild ancestor, some Latin word, is still found today. Okay. So if you're really good at guessing what the next word is, then you can create a whole text. And this is exactly how things like GPT-3 or ChatGPT work. Okay. So the impact of all this is, in my opinion, quite groundbreaking, because you remember what I told you in the beginning, artists, they had to find new avenues for their talent. I think the same will happen with a lot of fields. So in my opinion, you have two large impacts. We're at a crucial moment today. I've been in the field for almost 15 years, and I've never seen something that was moving the lines so much. The first one is what I mentioned before, that people will have to find new avenues. So it means that they will have to become, paradoxically, more creative. They will have to find more ideas that the AI cannot find by itself. The second impact is that you can start to think generating designs that are customized for everyone and everything. Today we use the same phones, we have the same shoes, we live in similar houses, we sit on the same sofa. Like today you go to a friend's place and sometimes you find they have the same type of furniture. But if it becomes cheap to generate new designs, why not use it? The reason why we all have the same things is that there was this idea of economies of scale, and that led to mass production. But today we could imagine that this could reverse. So when you think of these two things together, I think they're transforming our world in all these different applications. They're transforming our world from a world that is hyper-uniform to a world which is hyper-unique. And this is what I'd like you to think about when you walk out of this room. Where can you use this knowledge, and how can you become someone with a hyper-unique idea which can be helpful to other people? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Julien. I mean, this is very interesting. So hyper unique. Just to carry on with your example here, though, is this couch example directly comparable? Because, I mean, are we all going to have hyper unique couches? Someone's still going to, at the end of the day, build these very unique things. So how does possibly AI get over that hurdle?
Okay, that's a very good point. So I made a little shortcut, which is you still need to build the thing, which means you still need to have some automation on the manufacturing, and I think this will come also with AI tools. And also other technologies, so of course 3D printing, but you can think of robots that could assemble things, cut things in a smart way, and so on.
Okay, so it's going to work in unison with other technological advances in physical manufacturing and so forth to enable this uniqueness there. Is there another, I mean, is the couch one you're saying it's sort of just an easy to grab onto example? Is there an example of this that you're seeing sort of play out maybe a little bit more soon or straightforward, or is there something else that you're seeing today, how that's happening?
Yeah, good question. I mean, of course, the things which are early in the pipeline all have to do with content, like digital content, so text, images, music, movies, these kind of things. And then I think one area which is a bit obscured today is not only in the generation of objects or things, but also in the generation of processes. You can think of industrial processes, think chemistry. Today you have some engineer who still has to sit down and think, how do we produce that molecule? But maybe tomorrow this could be fully automated.
Okay, so with an AI or something like that, like analyzing the different combinations of chemicals, for example, or the way that molecules, chemicals, DNA, whatever, could be stuck together. Okay. A lot of good questions. And by the way, I'm taking your questions here on the Vote to Mo app, so please, and sort of as I look down, I'm sort of trying to coalesce them into the greater points that you're making here. I guess let's dig in. Let's go for this. Let's talk about AI bias, and it's an interesting one. Is there, I mean, if you're taking a training set, a set of training data, then biases in that initial training data will, I mean, at least to my mind, then they come out in the final AI. So are there other forms of algorithms or that, or how are we getting rid of bias?
So how do you get over bias? The main thing is to be aware of it and to keep this in mind from the beginning of the process. So one way that you can deal with bias in the algorithm is to put more weight on the things which are underrepresented, for example. Okay. So that's one idea. Another thing which is quite obvious is if you're aware of it, then collect more data in the places where you feel that there is bias. A very crucial point is to be able to follow up and measure bias across the whole process. And this means that you don't want to learn on things which you don't want to, for example, discriminate about, but then you want to check if in the end result, this would still unbalance the results.
Okay.
It's important to see that you have some variables which are sometimes quite correlated. So actually biases are sometimes used for doing wrong things as well. So for example, if you don't want to use the age as a variable, then as a proxy variable, you could use musical tastes. Okay, sure. Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, that could be inferred, right? So you could take musical taste, infer age, and then keep on going with bias. So it's interesting because there isn't one goal. We are biased as human beings, and so therefore the things that we produce will probably have some bias in them as well. We're getting there with some good questions. Thank you. These ones are coming along very nicely. For a moment, just maybe muse a little bit for me on, I mean, generative AIs. Inform us a little bit, AI and machine learning. Because when I look at ChatGPT, it looks like machine learning, if I take a more strict definition. So where do you start saying something is more of an AI? How are you using that terminology compared to just straight up machine learning?
Yeah. So AI is a broader term. It's a bit of a catch-all term. And machine learning is one crucial part of it, which is one of the biggest part of it, at least as we see it at the moment. But of course, in intelligence, you also have things like reasoning. You also have the whole idea of optimizing something. I would also put in intelligence.
Okay.
And to do learning, the whole thing is actually an optimization. So in fact, we could just talk about optimization, but it's less attractive. So I think the room would be less full.
Right, okay, because it's such a hot topic, what is AI? Because I think there are a lot of people out there, when they hear AI, they think it means intelligence. Well, I mean, I know it means artificial intelligence, but they assume it means like the computer is thinking, the computer has its own...
Okay, that's a good point. So I think we have to distinguish between the result, which is intelligence, and how you get there. Just like in the past, people thought about flying, and they looked at birds, and then the result that we have now, like airplanes, are quite different from birds in the mechanics. And some people thought maybe it's the feathers that make the birds fly, so they started adding feathers to their little airplane devices, unsuccessfully, but I think it's very important to distinguish the two. So it's the same for intelligence, in my opinion. You can have a machine which is intelligent, doesn't mean that it's conscious, doesn't need that it has a soul or anything like that. It depends on your beliefs.
Okay, all right, right. So as we're moving forward as society, like all things in a culture, we're sort of developing this understanding of what words and terms mean, and it sounds like we're still getting there, because this is so new.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you doing, what about works that we're developing a training set, an AI, a machine learning, whatever you want to call it. Are there efforts to then make, let's say, a parallel system that checks the first system? Do we have systems that verify a data set or a machine learning systems looking at other systems and to say, have they got bias? Are they right? Are they wrong?
Yeah.
Is that is that another area of where we're going with this?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Sometimes you can integrate different systems together. Sometimes you need to build two systems and then plug them in. I'll give you an example. One key aspect is also to understand how certain you are about a result. So let's say you have a medical diagnostics. You want to know what's the confidence of, or you have a machine that will be an autonomous machine, an autonomous car that will stop in front of a pedestrian, and you want to know how confident it is. So either you can build this in the neural network that you're building, or you could have another neural network that will just learn in this situation with this input. If it produces that result, then it must be around that much confident.
Do you think that such measures of the confidence of the AI are important? So if you listen to a human being, we're very well trained. I can read your body signals and go like, all right, this guy's bullshitting me, or this guy seems to know what he's talking about.
That's what you were thinking the whole time, right?
Yeah, what's this guy going on? Because a commenter here makes a sort of a passing note that often ChatGPT sounds really confident when it isn't right.
Yeah.
So my question though to you more specifically is, should we also be building in, like, should AIs, or say, here's my answer and I think it's like 75% right, should a self-awareness, for lack of a better term, of my correctness be built into these?
I think this is totally relevant to have some mechanism that will tell you how confident it is, especially for this type of application, given the consequences that people take this as truth to some extent. Also for moderation, it's important to have some mechanism like this. And I think for moderation, it's important to give control to the user a little bit on what they want, and also what is embedded as moderation, because at the moment it's a bit of a black box, right? Yes, what was the beginning of your question?
Oh, so do you think that should be built into it? Sorry.
Yeah, okay, sorry, yeah. You were speaking about bullshit, and I want to mention something which is, in a way, AIs that generate text are a bit bullshitters. They just generate something that's pleasing. They were trained to generate something that a human would see and accept as valid, not trained to generate something that is true. And I think this is an important distinction to make.
Okay. That's interesting, because I guess, I mean, okay, first of all, in the room, please put your hand up if you tried ChatGPT. All right, so most people had a go, right? Okay, next question then. Who would say that they've used it beyond like 5 or 10 times, like something meaningful, let's say? Who's done something meaningful with it? All right, okay. I mean, a little less, but still, you know, I said I get Star Wars years, right? I asked for Star Wars facts out of ChatGPT, so not meaningful. But you're kind of going that text systems like that are trained to, yes, give us some data, but present it in a way to present it well. Mm-hmm. You know, just as like if you dress in a suit or you dress nicely, we're more likely to believe you presenting it
exactly
well, and ChatGPT does that.
If I can add something to this, it's like if you say no, actually you're wrong. So it says something. You ask a question, it gives an answer. You say no, you're wrong, and then say oh, actually yeah, I'm wrong, and then it spits something out, which is something else, which might be equally wrong too. It's just like a salesperson trying to sell you something in a way.
Duffman says a lot of things. Yes. All right, I'll go for it before we keep going on ChatGPT. Can you give good examples of AI in education? It's an interesting one.
Right, yeah. In education, I think what we'll see is AIs that customize to what the students need. So I think, and you can imagine like creating content automatically for a certain student, understanding their mindset, what they're interested in, how they learn best, and you can monitor them. You can focus on the things where they have difficulties to understand, which are things which are hard to do today because our education system today is mostly built after the Industrial Revolution idea that we mass produce knowledge in people's mind, right?
Okay, standardized textbooks, for example. Yeah, there is the question in the textbook presented with one particular way, one particular perspective, but I don't know, if the question was worded in a different way or just was on a different topic, all of a sudden the child could, you know, open up and answer the question. Is that sort of where you're going, like what you mean by this?
Yeah, what I mean is some students are more visual, some more auditive, some understand better with certain types of examples, some need a lot of examples to understand a concept. So we're all quite different in how we learn, and I think we could learn a lot faster as well, be more interested if the content was customized.
Okay.
And by the way, I think it's super important, so in the light of what we talked about before, to adjust a bit the education system, to take all these tools into account, embrace them, and not just say, okay, like don't use this, don't use that. I mean, imagine if we went back 200 years ago, and we had physicists who had to do all the calculations by hand. And today we have calculators. Imagine if today we told all the physicists, no, don't use calculators. These are evil tools. You should do everything by hand.
Sure. But it took us a while to work out our relationship with calculators, for lack of a better term. Just as it's going to take us a while to work out what is our relation. The problem is the AI is going to evolve. The calculator was the calculator for a while now, at least. So we've got to socially work that out. Because, so what do you think then about situations where, okay, the ChatGPT makes my essay, but then the teacher's got the other tool that detects if the AI wrote it, so then the teacher's, doing it through there. But then, and this is inevitably, who knows if it's true, but it's inevitably going to come up. Some kid's going to write an essay, he wrote it, or she wrote it, but then the anti-AI tools, false flags that. Right. So, and, is that stuff happening? Are kids making stuff up? I don't know. So we've sort of got one AI, another AI, but then the checking AI, I guess the example, the checking AI isn't correct either, and now this kid is get labeled bad for no good reason.
Right. Well, maybe after the talk, I can give you some tips on how to cover up your ChatGPT.
Actually, what does happen if you ask ChatGPT to produce something that doesn't sound like ChatGPT made it?
Good question. I haven't tried this, but
computer starts smoking or something coming out.
I mean, one good way I think to use this type of tool is you need to condition it to say like you're this type of person, you write in this type of style, and then you need to constrain it so much. It's a bit like squeezing the toothpaste out of the tube. The more constraints you give it. And one thing which I like to do, by the way, is, for example, you give it a text to generate, or you write something, and then you say, give me a critique of that text. Like, be harsh, tell me what's wrong about it. It will give you feedback, then you can iterate. It's all about constraining it.
All right, fair enough. So it's, sure, don't make it for me, but give me some feedback on, give me maybe a starting point, give me a couple of headers or something that I can work with, then give me feedback on what I've written. Yeah. So again, this is the idea of what's our relationship with this. We know in 10 years we'll probably know, no, don't just ask it to write it, but ask it to critique me or something like that.
It's a sparring partner, so you can ping pong with the AI.
Yeah, so keeping on going with this idea of there's an AI and then there's an AI to check the other AI and probably another one to check that. Do you see a major threat in any of these? Like, is it the fake news? Is it deep fakes? Is it something that do you see as something we might not be able to check? Like, is there possibly a deep fake we'll never be able to determine or something? Or what are the threats?
Yeah, what are the threats? Yeah. So just on the last point, yeah, of course, it's a bit of a cat and mouse game where you have the thing that detects and something that tries to go under the radar and so on. But the threats in general on AI, they are about biases that we touched upon before. Then we have explainability, which is how do you know that the reasoning behind what the AI came up with? So I think this is important too, to understand where the decision comes from in the end, right? Okay. Then you have privacy, and I think this is something that we're giving up a bit too easily as well. So there are certain things that we should have control over. And the last thing is the alignment of the interest between the person who created the AI and the user of the AI. Because if I control an AI that generates everything about your whole life, I can maybe stir it one way or the other, right? So you shouldn't trust just me on that.
Okay, so I mean, don't trust the AI necessarily, but that's difficult because we can't go and analyze the algorithms, and like how to audit an AI system would seem to be the next logical question, which is, I don't know, impossible or very hard to do. Is there auditing? How do you audit an AI? You know, the politicians go like, I'm going to look at the algorithms and the code and I'm going to work it out. And some politicians jump up and down and say some bullshit, right? But how do you really go about verifying an AI?
Right. You could approach it multiple ways. I think it would make sense to have some sort of standardized test. You could use it maybe as a black box, but still see how biased it is in that way, and so on, right? So I think you could have a checklist and go through it this way.
I guess so. That makes sense, because if I want to verify a human being is, I don't know, correct or whatever, I don't open the brain and look inside. I ask them questions. I black box it. I give them an interview. So I
mean, then of course you have the problem of cheating to some extent. We've seen this with engines that, if the car detects it's in testing mode, then all of a sudden it becomes nice and it doesn't pollute anymore. Yeah. So there will be challenges.
Okay, I like that. I want to leave us, we've just got a little bit of time, but I mean, AI consciousness, AI becoming alive, Skynet, blah, 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 the thing is always there. More than that, not like so much when, but can you give us some thought about what do you define as AI consciousness? We're always like, soon the tipping point comes, as the movies have told us. Is that a real thing, or what do you philosophically feel about that?
And actually this is a very good question. I love this consciousness question. Like, first, it's very hard to define consciousness. I have not found a definition that I like yet, to be honest. If you take a dictionary, there is an entry for dictionary, so in a way it knows about itself. So I would say it's conscious.
All right, sure.
One physicist told me, like, you can't define consciousness, but you can project it on other people. So you can say, I have it, I know what it's like, so other people probably have it too.
So you can project it, or is it, sorry, did you also mean like we can judge it? Like, one can't say I have consciousness, but we can all agree Julien has consciousness. Is that sort of it, or not?
What I mean is that if I have consciousness, I can think, oh, you act like a human being. Probably you also have consciousness.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for Julien. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.